Hello. So today we're going to talk about Worlds Apart, or I'm going to talk about Worlds Apart on page 76. So to me, this is a very interesting article, and it's 2 pages, and it starts off with an introduction that talks about the Heaven's Gate cult that in 1997, about 39 people committed suicide because they had this belief that the comet Hale-Bopp, and I remember this, the time frame, because I was taking an art class at CCP, and I remember I'd be able to see the comet in the sky for about 4 months or so from the Mint Building steps. So they believed that the comet was coming, and that by killing themselves, they were going to be lifted up into this magical, the force of this, from this comet. So people died from this belief. So the article goes on and makes the point: how could so many people together get something so obviously wrong? And then paragraph 4, the author talks about how he's and I'm pretty sure it's a he, but I can't be positive. But I'm going to call him a he. Is a person who does religious studies and so forth, and all over the world. And then talks about in paragraph 5 how most people would describe themselves as believers, but that when it comes to having a faith in believing in God, people are able to make the distinction between the realness of rocks and trees and the realness of their faith. And the difference is that and what it ultimately points out is that in order to have faith, it takes work. And that's why people go to churches and synagogues and mosques, is that you have to keep working on your faith. That belief takes work because it's faith, that there isn't that direct proof that's in front of you, as opposed to, it doesn't take work to believe that the brick is the brick, the door is the door, and that's the difference for most people, and that's the healthy thing. So to question 1 of things, paragraphs 5 and 6, why, according to the article, is maintaining a sense of God's realness hard for believers? And again, it's hard, and that's what means that it requires the act of faith, because the proof isn't coming, and people don't expect it to. People don't expect to hear, as they pray every day or every week in churches, they don't actually expect to see a vision of God. They don't expect to hear a voice talking to them specifically, uniquely. They're praying, and it takes effort to maintain that belief, because you do so knowing that you're not really going to hear concrete, tangible proof. And when you see signs that confirm your belief, they have to be interpreted. They're regarded as signs, but not as, yes, we hung out together kind of thing. So that's what this is. That there's a difficulty in maintaining faith for that reason. So then the article talks about how that this is a paracosm. When people believe in something with such detail, and I talked about this in the vocabulary, a paracosm is a super detailed imaginary world that you could picture it very minutely, and the smells and the detail. And for the people who were in the cult where they died, they were so convinced it was real to them that this takeaway to the stars was going to happen. In the same way that some people can have a paracosmic sense that they're actually friends with the characters they see on TV. So if believing that you have a connection to a celebrity is so real for you that they know you like you know them, you could say that that's paracosmic. And then I said in the vocabulary that some people have such a vivid understanding of Star Wars or Harry Potter that it becomes a paracosmic sense of the realness of those characters, and that can become unhealthy. So he goes on and explains that a problem, and I think this is one of my questions, question 2, what is the problem with being socially isolated in regard to a paracosm? So the more that you're cut off from the general world, the world of common sense, the general world in which we navigate with each other, then in your social isolation, you really believe there becomes a feedback loop, and you believe the things over and over, and then it creates this realness of something that can become dangerous. So ultimately, and I think this is ultimately was the purpose of this article regarding contemporary society. And what this is that he's making the case, as so often with my articles, for this is what's happening in our politics, that we're living in separate worlds. So we Philadelphians live in a world, and you hear me talking about it in class, where the Trump supporters are stupid and evil because we're a feedback loop amongst ourselves. Now, how accurate is that, and how we don't have contact with them, is that paracosmic? And I would argue even worse are the rural people, the Trump supporters, or people who have this hatred of immigrants, or blaming people of color for the problems that are in their world, and that it festers, that you have this belief because you're in these feedback loops, watching Fox News and reading certain magazines and things over and over, and then people around you speak the same way about immigrants and about outsiders, or men constantly talking negatively about women, and if you're in isolation where you don't have the larger world around you, if you're not actually in contact with people of color, with immigrants, but you're only surrounded by people who look like you, presumably in this case white people, and you together amongst yourselves perpetuate, yeah, it's those people, and more seemingly like evidence comes in from these sources, it builds up this sense in social isolation where bad things could happen, bad things for people taking actions violently, and we've seen, of course, churches being shot up and various acts of violence all over, to, in general, these beliefs that perpetuate, that have led to the voting of Trump winning, which was, of course, so incredibly unlikely to those of us, again, I would argue, who live in the world more as it is in its actuality. So this is what he's talking about. He's taking the instance of the people who committed suicide to get onto the tails of the comet, which presumably all of us could see as a ridiculous and absurd paracosmic view, and saying, well, some people amongst us maybe are similar in having extreme views like that. So here I want to talk a bit about possible topics and things to think about. So my first essay topic question here is, and then question 4, and everybody likes to get all the questions done. What does the author recommend that we do to get out of the unhealthy view? So, of course, the thing to do would be to get out of your paracosm, if that's the case. Talk to people who are different from you. So for us, I should be meeting people who believe in having guns and going hunting and things like that. Because honestly, except for one person, I don't know anyone who who voted for Trump, and I don't know people who think like that. So my view is somewhat socially isolated. And again, more importantly, the people who have those isolated views need to get out and to be among people who are different from them. So back to the topics. So what do you think of the idea in paragraph 11? Faith is the process of creating an inner world and making it real through constant effort. So it's interesting to think about that idea that faith requires effort to maintain it. This can be applied to religion, but also to politics, identity, the role in one's family. So what I think is interesting about this is how much effort do you put into seeing things in a certain way. And I'll share for myself, this is, again, how these essays inspire things. But I think a lot, in order to do my job, I don't just do it, but I think about my role. Like, it's important for me to recognize, or to construct this vision of the value that I'm doing as a professor and such, to help me be able to like know what my value is. And I do this with a lot of things. I do this with with being a father, with doing the stand-up comedy as I do. I don't just do it, but I think, well, what is this? It serves to construct my identity for me. So I guess what I'm asking in this question is, how do you potentially see yourselves that way? So the next question talks about how sometimes we overlap where we're out into the world, and sometimes we're more enclosed. And it talks about, well, what do you think about this? I mean, is it good to be connected, or should our worlds be more diversified? And I'm right now looking at the time, so I'm going to bring this one to a close. If people have questions, write, and I will try to address them.